I have rehearsed the terms so many times that they have worn grooves in me, like river water over stone. I offered her a contract. She accepted it with composure I did not deserve. And somewhere between the ink drying and the first frost on Aldenmuir's windows, everything I thought I understood about myself turned out to be wrong. Let me begin with the facts as I understood them then. I was the Duke of Aldenmuir, and I was running out of time. Not in any dramatic sense. No physician had handed me a verdict. But my father had died without a settled heir, and his father before him, and the weight of that unbroken chain of negligence had come to rest on my shoulders with the particular heaviness of inherited failure. I was 37. I had no patience for the marriage market, no interest in the eligible daughters who were paraded before me at every season, and no illusion that affection was something I had any talent for. I wanted an heir. I wanted the line secured. I wanted, in short, to fulfill an obligation and return to the solitary quiet I had built around myself like a second estate. I went to Lord Harwell's household because the arrangement suited the practicalities. He had 2 daughters. The elder, Miss Cordelia Harwell, was the one every drawing room mentioned, luminous, assured, the kind of beauty that fills a room before the door is fully open. She was also, as I discovered in 2 conversations, utterly indifferent to Aldenmuir and deeply attached to a cavalry officer who had not yet made his intentions known. The younger daughter, Miss Emmeline Harwell, sat in the corner of the parlor both times I called. She was not hiding, precisely. She simply did not push forward. She had steady gray eyes and a way of listening that made the air around her feel still. No one introduced her. She introduced herself on the second visit because the silence had apparently grown long enough that she found it rude on her family's behalf. She said, with perfect calm, "I am the other one, Your Grace. You need not remember my name." I did remember it, and when it became clear that Cordelia would not suit, and that the season was advancing, and that my patience for drawing rooms had reached its absolute limit, I thought of those gray eyes and that composed voice, and I made a calculation. I asked to speak with Emmeline alone. Her father looked surprised. Her mother looked relieved. Cordelia, I believe, was not in the house. I told Emmeline plainly what I needed: an heir for Aldenmuir, a marriage of arrangement conducted with mutual respect, and no pretense of warmth beyond what courtesy required. Once an heir was secured, she would have her own rooms, her own establishment within the estate, whatever freedoms the role allowed. I was not, I told her, asking for her happiness. I was asking for her compliance. She was quiet for a long time after I finished speaking. Then she said, "And what do you imagine you are offering me in return, Your Grace, beyond a title I did not seek?" I had not expected the question. I answered poorly, citing the estate, the security, the rank. "I see," she said. "And you have decided that a woman who has spent 26 years being overlooked in her own parlor must naturally be grateful for a cold arrangement with a man she barely knows." There was no bitterness in it. That was the remarkable thing. She stated it the way you state the weather, clearly, without malice, as simple information about the shape of the world. "I would not call it cold," I said, which was an absurd thing to say. She looked at me with those steady gray eyes. "What would you call it?" I had no answer. She gave me 2 days to formulate one, and I spent both of them discovering that I could not. When I returned, she received me alone, her hands folded in her lap, and told me she would accept the terms, but that she intended to name her own. She would have the library at Aldenmuir, unfettered access to the accounts she was responsible for managing, and she would not be excluded from decisions that concerned the estate she was being asked to help secure. She was not, she said, a decorative arrangement. If I wished a decorative arrangement, I had come to the wrong Harwell. I agreed to every condition. I told myself it was efficient, expedient. A woman with practical intelligence would make a competent duchess. The terms suited both parties. I drove back to Aldenmuir in the November dark and told myself I felt nothing beyond the mild satisfaction of a settled problem. I was wrong about that too. She arrived at Aldenmuir in December in a gray traveling cloak with snow on the shoulders and a trunk of books that required 3 footmen. She thanked every one of them by name within a week. I watched this from a distance with something I chose to call mild interest. By January, she had reorganized the household accounts in a way that saved us a significant sum and embarrassed the steward into better practice. By February, she had identified 3 tenants whose cottages needed repair before spring, written to their landlords, who were, it turned out, me, and left the relevant correspondence on my desk with a brief and unapologetic note. I found myself reading it twice. We had dinner together on Tuesdays, because I had suggested it, and she had agreed with the same unadorned acceptance she brought to everything. Those dinners were at first the most uncomfortable hour of my week. She did not fill silence with pleasantries. She waited for something worth saying and then said it. And the things she said were frequently inconvenient. She told me in March that I intimidated my own tenants into silence when I rode through the village, and that this was why I did not know the bridge at the North Field was failing. She told me in April that my father's portrait in the East Corridor made the housemaids uneasy, and perhaps it need not hang where everyone had to. Pass it 4 times a day. I moved the portrait. I rode through the village differently. I told myself this was because she was practically correct, and not because I had begun to look forward to Tuesday evenings. I noticed things about her that I had no business noticing. The way she marked a page with her thumbnail when interrupted, as though she trusted herself to find her place again. The way she spoke to my old wolfhound, Garnet, with the same directness she used with me, as though she considered plain speech a form of respect regardless of the recipient. The way she laughed, not often, but when she did, it was sudden and completely unguarded, and it felt like a door flung open. She did not behave like a woman waiting out a contract. She behaved like someone who had decided, quietly and without announcement, to be fully present in the life she had been handed. She planted a kitchen garden because the one that existed was insufficient. She persuaded the local rector to open the schoolroom to the daughters of tenants, not just the sons. She had opinions about everything and shared them without deference. And if I disagreed, she engaged the disagreement directly. And if I was wrong, which I was occasionally, she let me discover it myself rather than making a performance of it. In June, a storm took half the roof from the Pratchett cottage in a single night. I rode out at first light and found her already there, her hem 6 inches deep in mud, directing the salvage of furniture with the calm of a field marshal. We worked through the morning side by side. I had not done labor of that kind since boyhood, and she did not remark upon it, which I understood to be its own form of approval. At one point we reached for the same fallen beam, and her hand came down upon mine, bare and cold and certain, and neither of us moved for a moment that lasted a good deal longer than a moment. She looked at me. I looked very hard at the beam. We carried it together and said nothing, and I thought about that nothing for a fortnight. I began to understand, very slowly, that I had made a bargain with a woman I had taken entirely for granted. One evening in late August, I came to the library where she was reading. I had not planned anything. I had walked the East Corridor with no destination, which was not a thing I ever did, and I had found myself at the library door and knocked. She looked up. The window was open behind her, and the evening light was the color of warm stone, and she had a smudge of ink on her left hand from something she had been writing, and she looked at me with those gray eyes in that familiar, unhurried way, and I thought, I have been a fool of the first order. I am not a man who speaks eloquently in the moments that matter. I told her I wished to renegotiate the terms. She set her book down and waited. I told her that I had made an arrangement I had called practical, and that I now understood to be something I wanted entirely for the wrong reasons, because the wrong reasons were, in fact, the right ones. That what I had wanted without knowing it was someone who would not let me be comfortable in my smaller self. That she had made Aldenmuir into a home not by decorating it but by deciding it deserved one. That I had tried very hard to keep the arrangement cold, and that I had failed, and that I was glad I had failed. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You have rehearsed this badly," I admitted. "Good," she said. "You rehearse everything else perfectly. I prefer this." "And renegotiate to what terms?" "To the real ones," I said. "Whatever those are. To trying." She looked at me a little longer. Then she held out her hand, the one with the ink on it. I crossed the room. I have never in my life made a wiser decision than the one I made when I took it. Aldenmuir has known colder dukes than me. I expect it has known less fortunate ones as well. I know only that the woman they never bothered to look at, in the corner of her father's parlor, was carrying something the rest of us had not the sense to see. And that when she offered me her hand in the amber light of a summer evening, I held it as though I meant never to let go, because by then I did not.